Alright guys, so I've got a new watch here from San Martin, and this could potentially be their best watch to date, or at the very least their best GADA watch to date. So let's get into this and then you can find out whether you agree with me or not. So this is the review of the San Martin SN0129-GC. So I'll quickly get the watch out of the way and then we can briefly show you the packaging in passing. So it's the standard San Martin case now with the branding on the top, and then the double zips. Works well, and here's the actual watch. So straight away you can see there's some really interesting stuff going on here. So we've got that gradient dial. So there's actually 3 different dial versions of this. We've got this brown one that I've got here, which is a gradient dial. Then we've got a red one, which is also a gradient one, and then a white one. And they all have this really cool textured wave dial. So we'll get into that in a bit more detail, but before we do, first of all, let's go over the dimensions. So we've got a diameter of 39mm, thickness of 13.1, lug width of 20, and then the all-important lug to lug is coming in at 46.6. So you might think it's a touch on the thick side, but don't click off just yet. I'll show you that in a bit more detail, as I think it wears better than that would suggest. So when it comes to the weight on this supply bracelet, with all the links included, it's coming in at 150 grams, and then size for my 7-inch wrist, it's coming in at about 142. So let's take a closer look at that bracelet, starting with the clasp, and talk about that in a bit more detail. So we've got the San Martin hexagonal logo on there, pretty much standard now for San Martin watches. Then we've got this polished chamfered edge running down the side. And as you can see, we've got no micro adjust. So if we open it up, double pushes, and you can see, as you probably expected, we've got the on-the-fly adjustable clasp that you get on a lot of San Martin watches now. I do really like these, they work really well. And the more I use them, the more difficult I find it to go back to watches that don't have them. Just helps you get the perfect fit every time, as well as being able to adjust it throughout the day. And then we've got that sterile screw-down case back as well. Moving on to the bracelet. So it's a fully brushed bracelet, 3-link. Nicely finished, screw links, and then we've just got some polishing detail on the side. So that will gather fingerprints a little bit. Now moving on to the head of the watch. We've got a really nicely sculpted case on this one. So we've got those integrated crown guards, and again, nice bit of curvature to the case as well. So it's brushed on the sides, and then we've actually got a polished chamfer detail on the edge of the lugs, which continues over the top of those crown guards as well. Do like the way they've done that, looks really good. And that's carried on onto the bezel as well. So we've got brushing on the top, with that polished chamfer detail running around the edge. It's always got to have a nice brushed bracelet and case, just with some polishing details, just to break it up a bit, and just add a little bit of class, I think. I think they've nailed it with this one. When it comes to the crystal, you can see that sticking out ever so slightly past that bezel as well. So we'll be checking in a bit if that is sapphire. Now we're zoomed in a bit as well, you can also see we've got those female len links, helping keep that lug to lug measurement down. Given the option, I always prefer female len links. I just think they look better on most watches. And obviously it just helps it wear better as well, because it doesn't extend that effective lug to lug. But now let's get onto the dial, because that is one of the main bits with this watch that's going to catch the attention and probably draw you in, because there is quite a lot of stuff going on here. So as I said in the earlier part of the video, we've got that gradient dial on this brown version and on the red version. The white one is just the solid white as far as I know. So on this brown one, it makes it look like it's kind of sand dunes or something like that. I do really like the effect, and hopefully you can see on the macro shots it is actually textured as well, so it does kind of look like sand. This is the first San Martin watch I've checked out that's got this kind of dial. I've checked out a couple of Addy's dive ones. I'll leave a link to them up in the top if you want to check them out after this review. Getting back to this one though. So when it comes to the indices, they're all applied and they are really nicely done. I love the way they just kind of slope down and drop down into the dial on the inside, and they're high polish as well, matching the hands. Then we've got that date window at the 3 o'clock, which again has got the same kind of matching high polish frame. Personally, I would have preferred it down at the 6, and I think it would have been nice as well if they'd managed to do like colour match date window. So with the dial being black towards the edge, they could have got away with using black on this brown dial and red dial versions. Obviously the white one is already going to be colour matched, but again, I think that just would have been a nice touch. And then the only other thing on the dial is the applied San Martin hexagonal logo at the top. And then the text printed at the bottom, automatic, 100 meters, 330 feet. And then there's that black sloped minute track around the outside of that, which just blends nicely from the darker edge of the dial. I think it's a really nice design, really well thought out, nice smart looking piece I think. And now you can see the way the light plays with that dial. Sometimes you won't notice the gradient as much, or the waves, and then other times you will. It's a pretty dynamic dial, I do really like it. But now let's check whether we have actually got sapphire crystal on this, or if it is just mineral, using the trusty diamond selector tool. And yep, we have got sapphire crystal, so always good to see. And given that this is one of San Martin's more premium offerings, it's to be expected as well. And you've probably noticed already, we have actually got some AR on that as well. So it has actually got an ever so slight blue tinge to it, but it's quite subtle. You don't really notice it most of the time. It's only really around the edge. You'll see it. But now let's talk about the movement. And as you probably guessed, yep, it's the NH35 again. San Martin love an NH35. So if we unscrew the crown, which is easy to access despite having those crown guards, pop it out to the first position, we can change the date, then pop it out to the second position, second hand stops, go hacking, and then we can just change the time, and then pop it back in, second hand will re-engage, all works well, got hand winding as well. Your rock solid standard NH35 movement. It would be nice to see San Martin start using some high beat movements, possibly some 9000 series Miyota movements I'd like to see, because then they'd be able to get the case thickness down slightly too. So I think it'd be a really nice overall net positive with that. You get the high beat movement and the thinner case. But now let's check out what the loom's like. So I've got a bit there already, but let's charge it up, give it a proper chance. And there we go. So as you can see, at least initially, the loom is pretty impressive, and it should be because I've got BGW X1 on this. So despite the indices and hands being pretty thin, they've managed to get a good amount on there by the look of it. No patchiness at all, consistent across the hands and the indices. And you can see with the loom coming off that minute hand just by the date window, it's actually reflecting off that slightly. So there's a really good amount of loom on there. That bodes well for the longevity when we do speed this up in a minute. Would have been nice to see a little bit of loom on that second hand, but given the style of second hand we've got, I kind of understand why they haven't. But the main question for me is, are those thin indices and hands going to affect the longevity of the loom? Let's speed this up now and find out. So to begin with, not a lot of change, as you'd probably expect. Still consistent across the hands and the indices. And again, no patchiness. So it's holding up really well, despite that small surface area. They've got a good amount on there. So you've not got to worry about the loom on this, as you've come to expect with San Martin. It's always really good quality, and it always lasts a really good amount of time too. So hopefully now you're beginning to see why I'm saying this could possibly be San Martin's best watch to date, or at the very least, their best GADA watch to date. There's a lot of really good stuff going on, but it's not perfect. There are a few little things that I might possibly change. So with that being said, now let's get onto the pros and cons and show you what it's like on wrist before you make up your mind whether you want to pick one of these up or not. And here it is on my 7-inch wrist. So as you can see, wears really nicely. And you can also see now what I was on about with the light playing with all those little polished chamfered details on the bezel and on the case. I really do like that. And also the indices as well in the hands. That's the thing that stands out with this watch for me the most. It's just the attention to detail, which is also with the clasp as well, with the on-the-fly adjustment, so you get the perfect fit. I think it's what separates San Martin from a lot of the other AliExpress brands. A lot of them offer great value for money, but it's the little fine details that just separate them. So when it comes to the issues I have with this, there aren't really many. They are fairly subtle ones. They might not be issues for you, but they are personally little niggles more than anything for me. The main one being, I would have just liked to see that date window at the 6 o'clock, as I said earlier, and try and colour match it as well. Just make it black on the gradient dials, and then you can keep it white on the white one. So it wouldn't be that much work for them to be able to do that, but I think it would make a really big difference. The next one, again, it's a very minor one. I probably wouldn't have mentioned it, but I'm trying to find things that I would change, and this is one of them very slight niggly things. It's the AR I mentioned earlier. It has got an ever so slight blue hue to it. But again, the majority of the time, you aren't really going to notice it. The only other thing that people might have an issue with is the thickness maybe. So as I said, it's 13.1mm thick. But I personally think it wears smaller than that and looks smaller than that because of the design of the case and the bezel and everything. And obviously a few mil of that is going to be that crystal, as well as that case back as well. So that'll actually sit into your wrist so it doesn't wear as large. And I think the rest of the dimensions are really good. We've got those female end links, so the lug to lug is really compact. Nice curvature to the case. And again, I think it just wears really nicely on my 7-inch wrist. I really like the way they've integrated the crown guards into the shape of the case, so you don't really notice them at all. And then that kind of hides the crown slightly. That's the kind of attention to detail I'm talking about that separates San Martin from most other AliExpress brands. You don't really get that with the likes of Steel Dive. Steel Dive makes some nice watches, but they tend to be fairly basic in terms of the finishing and the design overall. Whereas San Martin, for me, they just take it up another notch. Something else that I think could do that with this watch even more, or just their watches generally, is just give us an option to have high beat movement in them. You're making some really nice premium feeling watches, but some people might feel a little bit let down, the fact that you're putting a fairly basic NH35 movement in them. And as I said earlier, if you do that, that will also help you be able to shave down the thickness of the cases too. So if you're still interested in picking one of these up, link is down in the description as always. That is an affiliate link, will help support the channel, but you don't pay any extra. And if you pick it up now, it's actually on sale at the moment. But that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.